Welcome to the Cleary Minds podcast. I'm your host, Tom Egan. Here, the classroom meets the real world, and we talk with leaders and changemakers. Let's get into it.
Sure. Good afternoon, Tom. I'm Donna Oser, the president and CEO of the Michigan Society of Association Executives.
And you came and talked to our students today, which was fantastic, and I took a lot of notes because I think, I was noticing this thread through all of your work experiences and leadership roles and increasingly more responsible and leadership positions all along the way. I was curious what you love most in all of what you do. What is the thing that excites you most?
Oh, there are probably a couple things. Throughout all of the roles I've had in my life, I really enjoy helping other people grow and supporting them on that journey, kind of helping them figure that out. And that can mean a lot of different things. That could mean helping an employee be successful. It can also mean helping connect people that I just think need to be connected for personal and professional reasons. So I definitely enjoy that. I get terrific satisfaction out of solving a problem. Now, what I mean by that is like a program that is in the red or a business that's in the red, and helping them kind of work through, is this something that can, because here's why. It's not about the money. It's about, a product is not, or a program is not going to be profitable if it isn't meeting the client, the member's needs. And so helping them solve that riddle, is a big deal. The third one is probably because of the last 25 years I've spent in nonprofit management, which means I've spent a lot of time working with boards, volunteer board leaders. And 7 of those 25 years were with the Michigan Association of School Boards, which of course is also volunteer boards. And so that means I've spent a lot of time working on governance related issues. So that would be kind of a third area that I get great satisfaction from when I'm able to kind of help make that work.
Yeah. Well, it's clear that you love what you do. You have that transmission that I think the students really connected with and got that message. And then I think I heard you linked it up in our Cleary Mind attributes as entrepreneurship. And I loved your definition or explanation of why that entrepreneurship was your kind of mode throughout all of that. How would you describe that?
Yeah, one of the students had asked me which of the Cleary Mind attributes had been probably most useful to me in my career, and I said entrepreneurship because that sort of beginner's mind, that creative mind, really applies to the big problems and the small problems, right? And so bringing that kind of spirit of inquiry, trying and being open to failing and adjusting, I have found great success in that. I think that is probably what I can credit most for the successes that I have had.
Yeah, I love that idea of trying and failing, and you gave the message of get as much experience, just dive into things and get experience and build that toolkit for whatever your next job will be. And I also love the message of telling people what you want.
Yeah.
Leading with that. Can you talk a little bit more about that, what you see with folks out there, people that are working for you in the industry?
Yeah, as time has gone by and I've worked with, all different kinds of people. So whether we're talking about, the part-time employee who is serving tables, or we're talking about the experienced and well-paid executive, really many people are uncomfortable talking about compensation, benefits, boundaries, like what they need in order to be successful in the position. Sometimes that's more training, sometimes it's greater clarity, more connection with their manager, their leader, whatever the case may be. And so I have just found that people appreciate knowing that actually much better things happen when you engage in that conversation. So for people, thinking about how to apply that, it's about, taking a couple minutes, write it down, put it in your phone, whatever you need to do to kind of plan the conversation, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to let Tom know there's some things that I know that I need, and let me be clear about what those are, right? So I know what I'm looking for. And then I'm going to schedule that time with Tom ahead of time. I'm not going to do it on the fly. And I'm going to be strategic about that. I'm going to do it at a time when I know that is probably the best time. I mean, no time is the perfect time, but what's the best time on Tom's schedule to have that conversation? So that's half the battle, right?
Yeah.
It's just like building it. You get confidence in the process of planning and then starting the conversation. I cannot think of a single time in my career and in helping people that did not improve the situation. Now, if it was a conversation about a raise or a new position or something, they may not always have gotten exactly what they wanted, but their situation was always improved. And when handled that way, the person they're talking to always appreciates that they put that thought and effort into it. And so I think that's another great strategy for your students to have,
Yeah.
in their toolbox to use for all kinds of things.
Yeah. And I mean, in that, you said, make yourself indispensable to your team, your organization, to your leader. I thought that was a great message, too.
Yeah, I have found over the years that just like leaning into it, right? Like just wade right into the waters and pay attention to what leadership is, struggling with and what they care about. And then, thinking about it, one of your students was talking about a situation where she was being asked to do a lot of things that weren't in her job description. And what should she do about that? And so we talked about, like, your whole life, you're probably going to be asked to do things that aren't in your job description. So let's think about, why does that bother you? Well, one of the reasons it bothered her was because it was interrupting the other work she was doing. And so I was like, well, think about it.
Yeah, that's great.
If you know that's going to come up, then why don't you do those things before you do the other work? And then a month or two from now, when you sit down with your supervisor, you can say, like, I watched how things worked here. I adjusted how I could support the team, right? And now I do these things right up so that you don't have to come and ask me to do those things. And then I can focus more on, the other work. And I want to stay. I enjoy working for you. But I am a college student and I have a lot of responsibilities, and I'm very interested in an increase in compensation.
Yeah, you gave a lot of very practical steps and examples, which I think was really good that they could, and I like the eagerness at which they were asking questions about their own situations. Like, hey, wait a minute, here's the situation I'm in. What do you think? What are your thoughts? What, if those are some of the things that have excited you and you've excelled at, what is something that's been like one of the biggest challenges for you in your career growth?
Some of what we touched on today, right, with some of the students, which is, sometimes, especially early in my career, I was, excited and eager. One of the things that fuels me, remember, is fixing problems and bringing programs to success. So sometimes I could be very ambitious, very, eager, aggressive to do that. And that's not always well received, especially, I think this is really important to note, especially in organizations that have a long history and they may move at a slower pace. And so thinking about what the strategy is, like, you want to affect change, but let's think about how I can build the momentum with whoever the stakeholders are that I have to influence so that they get on the same train I'm trying to get out of the station, right? And so that came from failing, trying, being on the right side of issues but not being able to affect the change, and being really thoughtful about what could I have done differently in order to have created the outcome I wanted, and then changing my methods based on that.
Yeah, nice. I like hearing that. Yeah, because one of the other things that stood out, you jumped into work and started building your toolkit. You started excelling. People started, leveling up with your career and inviting you to take more leadership roles. And you mentioned at some point, there was a point where, like, you needed a degree in order to go further. But you also mentioned that you were the youngest of 5 and the first in your family to go to college. And I think you surprised yourself at like what that meant to you. And yeah.
Yeah, your students today talked about feeling that they had imposter syndrome sometimes and maybe a lack of confidence. Well, I was sort of forced ripe is probably what a farmer
Forced
would
ripe.
call it, right?
Okay.
Where, I had ascended into leadership roles without necessarily having the credentials to get there. I got there, through hard work and diligence. And while I was glad to be there, my chosen path happened to have taken me into education. So my first 20 years in association management was in education associations. So I was a bit of an imposter to not have, anything beyond a high school diploma and be sitting in a leadership role with that community. And so I didn't talk about it much, certainly with them in the beginning. I felt, I guess probably embarrassed or ashamed about that. But I was successful in my role.
Yeah.
And fortunately, there was people around me that were like, you need to do this, Donna, So making that leap, but certainly part of it was an employer that was willing to make a partial investment in me.
Yeah.
And also that I really I could see my own potential, right? I'd reached a point where it was like, okay, well, if I do this, if I get my bachelor's, what then? Where will I be able to go then? And then after I got my bachelor's, I was like, wow, things are really crack-a-lacking. What will happen here if I get my master's, right?
Which you did.
Yep. And so for me, it was so validating. And I know that sometimes there's so much on people's plates, right? They're navigating personal situations and family situations, and you're just never going to have the time. But it was so empowering for me. And I would sit in class and just soak it up because it was so applicable to the work that I was doing that as I was excited to have the appropriate terms to use, the proven strategies instead of the ones I had sort of, cooked up on my own to kind of get her done. And the other piece about that we didn't touch on today, but I thought about it when we were walking over here, is that it didn't just change my life. Right? It changed my children's lives. Right? So my oldest son, his father is in the trades and is very successful in the trades, does a great job. But from the time that he, could hear, I was like, you're going to college, you're going to college, you're going to college. And he saw me go to college, right? If I didn't get my undergrad until I was 40, right? He was watching me study. He was watching me do those things. He missed me when I was away from the home, when I was at class or whatever. But he never hesitated, right? Because that path was blazed, right? He went right from high school into college without missing a beat. And, I tell this story that a couple of years ago, he and his wife came over. Mom, we're going to come over, is it a good time? And I was like, yeah. And I was so sure they were going to tell me that I was going to be a grandma. I was all excited. I was like, oh, let's have some tea out on the porch. And I was like, this is where I'm going to receive the news that I'm going to be a grandma. And he's like, Mom, I've decided to go back to school to be a chiropractor. And I was like, oh, that's good too.
Yeah.
I'm just joking, obviously.
Yeah.
But, he and I were very close. He and I talked about it. And it just seemed like the most natural thing to him because, again, he had seen his mother be successful in that. And for him, the decision to go back to school, right, he had his bachelor's, but the decision to go back to school was because he wanted a certain lifestyle. And it was not about money. It was about being able to, because the job that he had previously had him working a lot of nights. And he was like, I want to work, Monday through Friday during the day so that I have time to be home with my family. And I think as people look at their options today, right, where there's just so many different possibilities, I think an education now, it can be such a key to that lifestyle and the quality of life that they want.
Yeah. Well, and I guess that's what one of my last questions is, what message would you give to your 18, 19, 20-year-old self if you could go back in time? What would you tell yourself?
Oh, that's a hard question because I value, all of the experiences that brought me here.
Sure.
I think that if you are a young person and you are inclined towards some of these professions or jobs or roles that you suspect you need more information or education in order to be successful, don't think it's not possible for you. It does not matter what your high school trajectory was. That's so irrelevant in the big picture, right? And so I would say, build that network sooner. I think if I had talked to more adults, because obviously I had an interesting childhood, but I think if I had talked to more adults earlier on, I would have figured out how to resource college earlier, and that would have changed a lot of things. And so.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad to hear that Cleary was part of your life and made a difference, and you continued on to get higher education as well as a master's. I think you did a lot with leadership and organizational development, right? And certainly that would come into play with the work that you're doing.
Yeah, everything that I learned at Cleary, I mean, literally, whether we're talking about in the accounting classes, I mentioned the negotiations classes earlier, the organizational development, all those have been incredibly applicable, and some of those textbooks I've even hung on to.
Oh, wow.
Just because, especially on the team development organizational side, some of that stuff is still very relevant and kind of useful to have on the shelf.
Great. Well, thanks so much for everything that you brought to the students today, and we'll be talking about it some more and give you some fun feedback on all the things that landed with us. So thank you.
Thank you, Tom. It was a privilege. I enjoyed it.
All right.
Take care.
Amen.